The latest weird Justin Jefferson rumor that I don't know if we believe is apparently they were going to trade him on draft days. I don't know. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who do listen to this show every single day. My loyal hashtag everydayers, if you're listening to Locked On Vikings this time of year, you are in deep, and I appreciate you. If you are new here, hello and welcome. My name is Luke. I'll be your host. You can find this show anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings, including YouTube, Amazon Fire, and Roku, as well as like the Sirius XM app or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, we got another Justin Jefferson thing I guess we got to talk about because that's the thing of the hour. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Most of the show is going to be dedicated to the Everyman series, and today's entry is Jeshaun Jones, the wide receiver from Maryland, undrafted rookie, and everything that he kind of went through to get to. I mean, when you got a 6-year player, usually there's something. And boy, there sure is something, and a story of, I guess, perseverance, but not just like a story of stamina, a story of really learning how to have it, and in a way that kind of only his situation can teach you. I'll leave the tease at that. First things first. So you may have seen a whole bunch of stuff about the Vikings and like Malik Neighbors and going, what? So I guess the story of it is Charlie Walters put in his Pioneer Press column that the Vikings tried to trade up with the Chargers to leapfrog the Giants to get Malik Neighbors. And it's something that Mike Florio had also said as well. And this, to me, is not that interesting. There's a lot of phone calls that happen in the war room that would blow your mind, that not just never happen, aren't reasonable, that aren't even that serious of ideas. And so we don't really know which side of the coin this falls on. But maybe the more interesting thing, too, is that would have been paired. That wouldn't have been Neighbors and Addison and Jefferson. It would have been going up to get Neighbors and then trading Jefferson to Justin Jefferson to get the picks that would get you J.J. McCarthy anyways. So you're trying to turn it into McCarthy and Neighbors and having that be your duo and like using Jefferson as a bargaining chip there. That is the rumor. First things first, if that is true, I think that's a ridiculously bad idea. I think that's incredibly stupid. That you're just taking the most proven sure thing in the world and just adding a whole bunch of risk to it for no reason. So I'm super glad that didn't happen. And that's really where it ends. It didn't happen. It's over. That's it. I think if you really want to, really stir people up and try to farm some engagement, you would like try to drum up fear by being like, oh, maybe the relationship's really bad because they tried to trade him. He'd be really mad at that. Maybe he's really mad. Maybe he's going to demand a trade to Cincinnati. Maybe you should be really scared and click on my website every single day so I can show you how scared you should be. Works in every other news cycle. You can tell I'm like kind of sick about how sick of how these things get reported to. And here's the real, to borrow a term from the Around the League podcast. The La Review Magnifico here is, so the two people reporting this that are kind of putting their names on this report are Mike Florio and Charlie Walters of Pro Football Talk and the Pioneer Press. Charlie Walters did his today. Mike Florio talked about it a little bit on draft night. When he was responding to the Giants taking Neighbors, he basically said the same report. And then when Charlie Walters put it out there, Mike Florio responded saying, oh, well, we couldn't confirm that at the time, but we heard the same whisper. And isn't that interesting that he couldn't confirm it at the time? Because when Florio put that out there on draft night, he was pretty confident in his wording, and I'll link it in the show notes if you want to listen to yourself to his wording. It was very much, I trust my source, and, they tried to do that. This is what's happening. He says, according to my source, I'm told this is what's happened. This is what happened. And I'm not trying to start a war here, but I do think it's important to you, dear viewer, to understand who is and is not willing to report something that they haven't confirmed. That's what I learned here is if he hears it, he's going to say it. And if he confirms it later, that's great. That's a little bit outside of the beaten path of the way that other reporters will behave. I think most of the time a journalist will double check things, triple check things, and make sure that they're not going to go out there and say something that turns out to be wrong, right? If you say the Vikings are interested in Christian Wilkins and then they don't sign Christian Wilkins, people are going to not trust you that much more because of that, even if you weren't wrong in your report that they were interested and they just lost the bidding war. That kind of thing happens to someone like Darren Wolfson all the time. And I don't think that that's fair to him, but that's the way that it goes. So when you listen to Darren Wolfson and he says they're interested, you have to take that at face value only. And that's the way he wants to be read. That's the way he wants you to read him, is face value and face value only, right? When he like him specifically, when he says, team is interested in someone or they made a call, all he's saying is that they made a call. And if you take that and say, oh, they're going to sign him, you've just made the mistake. You're the one that messed that up. And so I think we have to kind of apply the same thing to somebody like Florio that, okay, he's willing to report things that he has not confirmed. I think there's just kind of a tax to the amount of credibility that you assign to those reports if they're not corroborated elsewhere. And with Charlie Walters, I don't really think that he holds a lot of credibility to me either. I know he's been in the world for a long time, and I'm sure that he wasn't making that up or anything like that. He's got lots of connections and all that. But there's a lot of reason for someone to lie to a reporter about that. And B, he's been banging a drum about a Justin Jefferson. Like, if you listen to him and Florio only, you would be 100% sure that Justin Jefferson's foot is out the door and that a contract is never going to get done. And if you didn't know that those two guys existed, you would have never heard about this idea at all. Like, it's truly those two guys are like the two driving forces. And then I guess some hopeful Bengals fans, which I don't know what that's about, but I don't know. That's I guess my takeaway is more about how we consume rumors and trying to find a way to like be misled less. That's the goal here, right? Like, we want to be a little better at discerning what's real and what isn't. And I think finding who isn't like rigorous about what they confirm or don't. That's why I place my trust a little bit more in some of the more like established, the more active, I guess, beat writers in the space. That, like, this is why I listen to Ben Gessling. This is why I asked Alec Lewis to be on my show instead of somebody else, because I think that those guys do a little bit more due diligence. And when they say something, it's very, very confirmed. And I am much more comfortable placing my trust in that. Maybe you feel the same way. Obviously, it's a stupid idea. I don't think anybody likes that idea. I don't think that there's a world where you feel better about that idea. You'd have to think that Malik Neighbors will end up better than Justin Jefferson, I think, because you like doing that, you still wouldn't have the quarterback. You'd have to spend most of your Justin Jefferson haul getting the quarterback. So you'd have to think that like JJ McCarthy and Malik Neighbors is better than JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson. And I think to think that, you probably have to do a lot of backflips, like a lot of mental gymnastics that I'm not comfortable doing. So of course it's an idiot idea. It's an idea that's so dumb that I have a hard time believing that anyone with a brain really thinks it's a good idea, like really would try it, right? So I don't know, maybe Kwesi's that stupid and all the racist people are right. Oh boy, I should really cut that. Next up on the show, we are going to do the Everyman series with Jeshaun Jones. Jeshaun. He's coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by America's number one sportsbook. It is FanDuel. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 that you can use to bet on anything they have on FanDuel, whether it's spreads in the last bits of the NBA and NHL playoffs, baseball games, home run props, anything you can find, and a lot of NFL futures as well. Who will win the NFC North? Over under win total stuff for the Vikings, player props for, over under Justin Jefferson totals, that kind of stuff. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up and put your first bet down on something you're very confident in, even if it's got really, really short odds, and you can get $150 back, 30-1 on whatever you can find, even if it's minus 1,000. So go find whatever speaks to you at FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go check out the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page for their 24/7 streaming channel that brings you Minnesota sports content. Plenty of talk about the Wolves, I'm sure, as well as Vikings, Twins, Wild, Gophers, etc. You can find that once again by searching out Locked On Minnesota Sports on YouTube. Welcome to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast. This is a series we do every summer concerning the backstories and personal histories of every new Minnesota Viking. Today we're talking about Jeshaun Jones, a wide receiver out of Maryland, an undrafted rookie, and his journey to the NFL and to the Vikings in particular. And a lot of these stories are particularly compelling, and I think everybody's story is compelling if you tell it right, and that's what I'm kind of setting out to do. I want to start this story in 2018. I want to say it was August, probably around the time when we, as Vikings fans, we were talking about Stephon Diggs' new contract. But I want to take you to his alma mater, Maryland. The opening game, Maryland against ranked Texas. Maryland heavy underdogs there. And what happened in that game is going to be the engine that drives the rest of this story. I don't think anything in this story happens remotely the way it does, were it not for this season opening game in 2018. By the way, I should say most of the information, or a lot of the information, came from Maryland's website, came from the Daily or the SB Nation Maryland Terrapins offering, as well as Emily Giambalvo of the Washington Post. That was a lot of my source there. So I'll link some of the articles and stuff in the show notes so you can go read what they wrote at the time. But everybody has their flowery description of this game. You might remember it if you're a diehard college football fan, because it was kind of the upset of the day. But there was a freshman, a true freshman, Jeshaun Jones, sitting on the bench for a lot of that game, as true freshmen tend to, who gets his number called early in the first quarter. And he did not expect this. He was trying to stay pretty humble, right? I mean, sure, you're a 3-star recruit. You're kind of the bee's knees. You get called to go play in the new to the Big Ten at the time, Maryland Terrapins. And he seemed to he was surprised to go in. He really thought, I'm going to need to wait for my moment. I'm going to need to pay my dues. And he had an understanding of that, but screw it. All right, coach, you need me in. I'm going in. We're going to call a jet sweep. Easy enough. Take the handoff, find a hole. That's going to be a great way to get the freshmen warmed up. And it's hard for me to say what happens to the Texas defense, but something goes horrifically wrong. One cut upfield, he finds a hole, and he's a bursty young kid. He's gone. In the blink of an eye, he's 5 yards ahead of the closest orange jersey. Touchdown. That's it. His first touchdown of his career. Later in that first quarter, he's running a scissors concept, or a deep kind of switch release with 2 goes, basically. So he and the receiver next to him are switching, and the Texas defense makes a classic error. This is the first page of the book of things not to do at defensive back. They're playing an off coverage, and they line up on the same depth. Never do that as a corner. You never ever want that as a corner, kind of specifically for this reason. You want to be able to cross in front of each other without bumping into each other, so never be at the same depth. But that's exactly what happens to them. The 2 defenders run into each other, they fall down, it's a busted coverage, and Jeshaun Jones is wide open. Touchdown Terrapins. He just got his second touchdown. He has been in college football for a total of 14 and a half game minutes, and he's already scored twice. Later in that, I think it's the first half again, but later in that game, it's your day, right? It's clearly you're the dude on fire. So they call for him a trick play, and also sensing that they can actually pull off this really cool upset against a ranked team, despite being, one of the lower rated programs in all of the Big Ten, which they're still kind of new to the Big Ten. So it's fair, but this Maryland was struggling at the time. They were not supposed to be even close here. And they call a pitch to Jeshaun Jones that's actually a pop pass. So he's going to pass for one. Finds the guy wide open, throws a good enough ball, touchdowns. So he records a passing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and a rushing touchdown all in the same game as a true freshman. And there's all kinds of ways to put it that he's the first guy since this year or the first guy ever to do it, as a Terrapin, as a freshman, and in his first game since, 1930, whatever. Like, there's so many record books that his name is now in off of this game. It's this incredible thing. And he plays the rest of that season. It's a pretty crowded wide receiver room. So he doesn't get in as like the true starter or anything like that. Again, he's a true freshman, right? He just had this one blow up game, but he does get 5 touchdowns, and he gets known as a guy with a nose for the end zone that, doesn't necessarily like match the rest of his volume, but he just turns it on. He knows how to catch touchdowns. He gets 5 touchdowns for Maryland, which ties Stephon Diggs's record for the school for most receiving touchdowns in a season. And that's receiving touchdowns, by the way. It doesn't count the jet sweep or the passing touchdown from that Texas game. Crazy game. And that moment, I think, takes the humility away in a good way. I think it proves to him that he's got something, that he's got juice, that maybe, he's not just lucky to be here. Maybe they're lucky to have him, and he can be something. And that excitement, it's going to well up. Like, it has to, right? Like, it just wells up in you when you kind of realize that maybe this is just easy and I'm really good. Like, that's the lesson that a game like that teaches you. And a pretty good year where he keeps it up, it proves that it's not really a fluke. Obviously, you're not going to be scoring 3 touchdowns a game or anything like that, but it's not a fluke. He continues to score. He continues to get in as a true freshman. He's way ahead of the curve. Going into 2019, it's a stiff competition. That's still a stacked wide receiver room, but it kind of seems like maybe he's going to be the breakout guy that wins the job, and maybe they actually have a superstar on their hands like Stephon Diggs. And they're still pretty not that far off of Stephon Diggs, right? Like, he just went and miracled over in Minnesota, and he's going into year 5. Like, he's not that far removed from being a Terrapin himself. So it's like fresh in everybody's minds. And that preseason, he's competing for the job. They're doing a non-contact drill. Unclear what the drill was. You've heard the word non-contact. You know where this is headed. He steps wrong, tears up his knee. ACL, out for a season. It is the kind of thing that just takes that confidence away, all out from under you. Now, you don't get to be a part of what you thought you were a part of. That's the hardest thing for him, is the FOMO. There's the missing out. He, for a long time, he'll go be on the sideline for practice when he's not rehabbing, just to like be supportive. He'll show up and he wants to see what they're doing and stay caught up. But it like hurts him. He's really struggles being on the sideline, not being able to be out there with his teammates. At one point, he takes the nameplate off of his locker and he moves it to the training room because he's like, "This is where I live now." It's like it's like an emo move, honestly. Like, it's like a dramatic thing, but it's where his head was just like despair and just not being able to be a part of the 2019 Maryland season. It kills him, and he really struggles with this. And when I speaking of Justin Jefferson, actually, I remember being struck by something he said this year when he was dealing with his hamstring injury. Now, that injury wasn't an ACL, right? Like, that was your rehabbing, but you're still there. You're still, he practiced with the team, but didn't play a couple times. Like, he was very much still around. But he said, like, he had to learn patience. He had to learn how to be patient because there is no rushing injury rehab. You do not get, like, there. You can compress the timeline a little bit if you work really, really, really hard. But a lot of it's just waiting. There's nothing you can do about it. And it really kills him. His goal is to get back to the field for week 1 of 2020. For his 3rd year, get back and say, okay, I missed one, but now I'm back. I'm this dynamic guy. A couple of those guys I was competing with graduated. Now it's an even more open competition. This job is mine. And then it's 2020. And the Big Ten cancels its season. And Maryland barely plays at all in 2020. Things are not looking great. But the way he handles what comes next is, I think, what gives him the strength to get to an actual opportunity in the NFL. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. It's the best place to find last-minute tickets. If you are looking for tickets to perhaps local sporting events, but anything, concerts, theater, whatever, Gametime is a great place to find last-minute tickets, and it can come in super clutch for you. Because right now, not only can you find stuff for the Viking season, we've got the schedule now, so you can find like the home opener against the 49ers. Maybe you want to go see the Kirk Cousins return game, the Atlanta game. If you're planning a trip to London, you can get tickets that way. You can find all that. But we live in a world right now where maybe there's a Game 5 in Minnesota, and maybe there is not for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So watch Gametime. If there is a Game 5 and you want to go to it, keep an eye on Gametime, and you might be able to score a pretty cheap ticket that way. You can save like 60% buying last minute for any event. Take the guesswork out of buying with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. 2020 took a lot out of all of us, from whatever perspective it was. I certainly got depressed. I think a lot of people did. And for Jeshaun Jones, it was compounded because that was supposed to be his triumphant return from his ACL injury. He wanted to come back for the 2020 season, and then the 2020 season was not there. Eventually, they did work out some games. You might remember this. Maryland did play a couple of games, and he returned, but he didn't return until October 26th, 2020. So much less triumphant. It was like a truncated season. It felt a little weird and exhibition-y. It wasn't quite the thing. 2021 was then going to have to be the year. And at this point, he's now draft eligible. He's played enough, right? He's draft eligible, but he hasn't he's not going to declare yet. I mean, he's of course missed way too much time. This is be a terrible time to try to join the draft. So he goes back to Maryland for the 2021 season, and things are actually going pretty well. He is now splitting a lot of time with a teammate of his, Dante Demas, but Dante Demas in early October tears his ACL. And now you kind of have this interesting situation where Demas is an older guy, and he's kind of been a bit more of a mentor for Jeshaun, but now Jeshaun can provide him advice. Say, this is what I went through. This is your thing. And then a week later, the unthinkable happens. It's against Ohio State. He plants wrong, makes a cut, tears his ACL again. Carted off the field. Mom's in tears. That is a gut punch that is of a magnitude I don't think many of us will feel. I'm sure we all have, I'm sure a lot of you have, I guess, equivalent moments in your lives where you had some dream and there was this thing that took it away, right? And maybe you had a kid earlier than you thought you were going to, or for whatever reason, you didn't get the job you thought you were going to, or whatever, right? And that kind of gut punch feeling. This is the second time for Jeshaun Jones. And he overcame what could have been a death sentence. He was back. He was working out. He played in 2020. He played in 2021. He was healthy. He was good to go. He was back. And now he's right back in it. And for some people, that's the hardest one. That's the one where you go, my God, I was back. I have to go through all of this again. That was such a long, arduous process. I was so proud of myself for getting through it. And now I got to do it again. That exasperates. I mean, that's the emotion that caused, I always think of Phil Lodeholt when I think of that, where he goes through this whole long rehab process and then he gets hurt again, totally unrelated to the Achilles that he tore. And then he goes, okay, now I got to call it quits. I can't do this again. I'm calling it quits. That was what really spurred him to retire in 2016. But that's not how it goes for Jeshaun Jones. And this is the perseverance that he learns. He goes into it with a way better attitude this time. And I think he says the familiarity helps him a lot. It's just knowing what he's getting into, knowing what to expect, understanding this is why my body feels this way. This is what it's supposed to feel like. It's a lot easier not to get frustrated when he just has that understanding of it. And he's got a buddy, Dante Demas. They will compete. They're basically racing each other in ACL rehab, the way that they describe it. that they're trying to reach milestones. They're trying to outwork each other. They're competing in the weight room, and they're competing in certain rehab goals. And they both set the same goal, same gig. 2022 week 1, we will be ready. That's what we want. 2021 season is over. We lost it. I mean, they only had, they were already about halfway through that season. So we lost half the 2021 season. That's a bummer as much as it is, but we will not miss any more. We're going to be back for 2022. And not only that, he's talking to his mom about all this too. He credits his mom a lot for helping him get through both times. And it comes easier to him. I think if you wanted to make a movie out of this, it would be like, I think it would center on that relationship. It would be like almost like kind of the vibe of like My Dinner with Andre, where it's like this friendship that like is cultivated through rehab, maybe you could even like editorialize it a little bit, like make them like rivals at the beginning or something like that, if you wanted to do that. But either way, the two grow closer with each other and they come back and sure enough, 2022 season starts. They're not just ready for they're in camp fully healthy. Like they're ready for week 1 and it's not a question at all. They're like good to go. They're cleared. And I think this is the point where if you made the movie, the credits would roll. This is where they've done it. They've overcome these hardships. But life goes on. The epilogue to this, I guess, is that they play in 2022, and he has a good season in 2022, and he can declare for the draft, but he doesn't seem to be considering it very hard. When he announces that he's returning to Maryland, he kind of says he calls it a no-brainer, and some of that could just be, saying the right things for the media, but he kind of says look, I have now spent 5 years learning the same offense. This is the other hard part of 2020. Maryland changes coaches. So he's they're all remote learning the playbook. He's now, did I say 5? He's now in his 4th year of that. And he's comfortable. He's comfortable with Talia Tagovailoa, who's the quarterback. He's got a rapport. There's a bit of that unfinished business, but I think it's just comfort. He's finally found a rhythm somewhere and he doesn't want to disrupt that. And maybe that's just I'm not really ready to go pro. I don't really feel like I'm emotionally ready to go pro. And I think that's perfectly respectable as well. For whatever reason, he goes back to 2023, and this is where he has the season that, it's hard to say what would have happened. Maybe he would have got drafted if he came out in 22, but 2023, he has a good enough season to get a shot. Not just a shot at a camp, but he's got a robust market, and he actually ends up getting a decent amount of guaranteed money. So here he is. He's a Minnesota Viking, and congratulations to you, with a much older and wiser mentality than he had. But I think the moment that gets him is it's the 2022 week 1. I think the moment where you really see this all kind of pay off. I think they're playing Buffalo, and it's that first time he catches the pass and he gets hit. That's what you're worried. You've been rehabbing this whole time, and you're worried about, how am I going to hold up to the violence of the sport? You get hit, you pop back up, you remember what that feels like. You're back into things. You get the adrenaline rush that you're still in, and you go, okay, now I'm back. Now I'm not, this is no longer perspective. It's very real because my body hurts because I just got hit. And he's able to sort of rebalance and restabilize his career path. Maybe a little longer in college than he wanted, but he lost a couple of years to an ACL rehab. So fair enough. So now here he is looking at a fairly open wide receiver room. I mean, I don't think it's beyond the question for anybody to make the team at, guy number 5, guy number 6, especially if you're a big dog on special teams. So we'll see what he can do there, but he's already overcome a lot and learned how to deal with stuff that isn't very fun. That's a lesson everybody learns at some point in life. And for him, he learned it in the rehab room. Tomorrow is Twitter Tuesday. Get me your questions. Yell at me if you really like unsubstantiated rumors and you really stand that. You can go ahead and fight with me over that. Or just, ask me whatever you can ask me. And there's a Google form in the show notes, or send me an email at lockdownvikingspodcast@gmail.com. And I'll put out a call on Twitter as I always do, so you can keep an eye out for that as well. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.